Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. The topic for today's discussion is water pollution, types of water pollution, major sources, causes, and their effects on aquatic life, on the plants, on the human being, on the ecosystem. This is Dr. Shiza Ayaz from Department of Botany, Division of Science and Technology, University of Education, Township, Lahore. Water pollution. It is mostly called as the contamination of water bodies, usually as a result of anthropogenic activities. Anthropogenic mean all the human or the man-made activities. Water bodies includes, for example, lakes, rivers, ocean, aquifers, and the groundwater. Water pollution results when the contaminants are introduced into the natural environment. For example, releasing inadequately treated wastewater into the natural water bodies can lead to the degradation of aquatic ecosystems. In turn, this can lead to the public health problems for the people living downstreams. They may also use the same polluted water for drinking or bathing or for the other irrigation purposes. Water pollution is the leading worldwide cause of death and the diseases due to many water-borne diseases. So here you can see the picture of the water pollution that are creating a lot of contamination in our ecosystem or in our environment. Here you can see a picture of industrial effluent. They are throwing their wastewater without any treatment into the drain from where the river may, from where the industrial wastewater may be passed on to the river without any further treatment. And these are all examples of creating water pollution in our environment by anthropogenic activities as well as from the various industrial sectors. So what is water pollution? It is the contamination of water bodies, for example, the lakes, rivers, oceans, aquifers, and the groundwater that are very often is needed to be happened by means of all human activities in terms of many sources. So water pollution mostly occur when the pollutants are in the form of particles or the chemicals or in the form of substances that make the water contaminate. So many industries and the factories, they are discharging directly or indirectly their effluent or the wastewater into their water bodies, into the main drain to their outlet without any proper treatment. So in this way, they get rid of all the harmful compound by releasing very toxic amount of these industrial effluents. So the pollutant, they get up into the water by the human causes or many other factors involving factories, industries, domestics that are caused by many anthropogenic activities. So water pollution is the second most imperative environmental concerns along with air pollution. So scientifically, it can be defined as any change or the modification in the physical, chemical, and the biological properties of the water that will have a detrimental consequence on the living things is called as water pollution. So there are many sources of water pollution. The most widely used or accepted terms are the major sources of water pollution, may including the point sources and the other one including the non-point sources. So, a point source of the pollution is a single identifiable source of air, water, thermal, noise, or the litter pollution. A point source has negligible extent that can be distinguished from the non-point sources of pollution. So it can also be defined as the pollutants that belong to a very single source. Example of this source would be emission from the factories into the water directly. So the non-point sources are the pollutants emitted from more than one sources, that is, their sources from the multiple sources, and the contaminated water after the rains that has traveled through the several regions may also included in the category of the non-point sources of pollution. So, point sources pollution, as I have already described earlier, it refers to the contaminants that enter a water reservoir through a discrete conveyance such as a pipe or a ditch. Their examples may include discharges from the sewage treatment plant in any industry or in any factory, or a city storm drain. Further examples including sewage treatment plants, oil refineries, paper and pulp mills, chemical, automobile, and electronic manufacturers, and many other factories. Regulated pollutant from the point sources may include the waste, soils, rocks, chemicals, bacteria, suspended solids, heavy metals, pesticides, and many others. So these are all sources of point source pollution. So the non-point source pollution. It is a pollution resulting from the many diffuse sources, in direct contrast to the point source pollution which results from the single source. So, non-point source pollution generally results from the land runoff, precipitation, atmospheric deposition, drainage, seepage, or many other hydrological modification like rainfall and the snow melting, where tracing pollution back to a single source is difficult. So they affect a body of water from the sources such as polluted runoff from the agriculture areas draining into the river, or the wind-borne debris blowing out to sea. So that these non-point sources of the air pollution affects air quality from the sources such as smokes, etc. Although these pollutants have originated from the point source, but the long-range transport ability and the multiple sources of the pollutant make it a non-point source of pollution. So, the term NPS also refers to the diffuse contamination that does not originate from a single discrete source. This means that they can be distinguished from the point sources pollution depending upon the origin of their sources. They have a cumulative effect of small amounts in terms of contaminants that gathered from a larger area. The best example can be seen in case of non-point source pollution may include excess of fertilizers in the agricultural land, herbicides, insecticides from the agricultural land and other residential area. More examples can be seen in this category like the oil, grease, and the toxic chemicals from the urban runoff and energy production. Sediment from improperly managed construction sites, many crops, and the forest land and eroding stream banks are also examples of the non-point source pollution. Here you can see a picture of only they can be derived only from a single discrete source of the pollution. Major NPS pollution sources are the urban, EVC, oil, gas, and other household chemical detergents, forest in the form of sediment and pathogen from the animal fecal matter. So these are all including in the category of non-point sources, whereas if we saw as the agriculture, so manure, nutrient in the form of pesticide, and the point sources can be released for only a single source that can be from the chemical industry, and many other carcinogenic contaminants can be released as a result of these major types of the water pollution. So there are many types of water pollution. Starting from the nutrient pollution, some wastewater, fertilizers, sewage, they contain high level of nutrients. Another type is called as the surface water pollution, then oxygen depleting to create the water pollution in the marine ecosystem, groundwater pollution, microbiological pollution, suspended matter, chemical water pollution, and the soil oil spillage. Starting from the first type of water pollution is called as the nutrient pollution. It is a form of water pollution, refers to contamination by excessive inputs of nutrients. It is also a primary cause of eutrophication of the surface water, in which excess nutrients, usually in the form of nitrogen or the phosphorus, they stimulate the algal growth. In other words, scientifically, over-enrichment of excessive nutrients in the form of nitrogen or the phosphorus stimulate the algal growth, and this process is called as eutrophication. अक्सर आपने पॉन्ड्स के ऊपर देखी होगी एक एल्गल मैट बना होता है, तो वो सारा जो है यूट्रॉफिकेशन का प्रोसेस शो करता है. Then the major sources of these nutrient pollution include surface runoff from the farm field, pasture lands, discharges from the septic tanks, and emission from the combustion industries. So how the nutrient pollution can create many problems in our ecosystem. It is well documented in the form of a small documentary.
Nutrient pollution is a significant threat to America's waters and coasts. Much nitrogen and phosphorus enter the environment because of human temperatures. These algal blooms are harmful because they produce toxins that can make people sick, and these blooms are becoming more prevalent. You can help prevent nutrient pollution by cutting down fertilizer and pesticide use and choosing phosphate-free detergents, soaps, and household cleaners.
So this is how we can control the nutrient pollution, by controlling the sources. So the primary sources for the nutrient pollution may include the primary sources in terms of wastewater, fertilizers, and the sewage contains high level of nutrients. If these nutrients are built up in a very high concentration in the water bodies, they may encourage the algae and weed growth in the water in a process which is called as eutrophication. So they make, as a result of these, the water becomes undrinkable and even clog the filters. Too much algae will also use up all the oxygen in the water, as a result of which many aquatic organisms in the water will die out in the absence of oxygen by creating the anaerobic condition in the marine ecosystem. So major sources of nutrient pollution. The primary sources for the excess nitrogen and phosphorus are, number one is the agriculture. These nutrients are present in the animal manure, and the chemical fertilizers are necessary to grow the crops. However, when these nutrients are not fully utilized by the plants, they can be lost from the farm fields and negatively impact air and the downstream's water quality. Second major source of these excess of nutrient is called as the storm water. When the precipitation falls on our cities and the towns, it runs across the hard surfaces like the rooftops, sidewalks, and the roads, and it carries along with the pollutants including nitrogen, phosphorus into the local waterways. Next source is called as the wastewater. As the name indicates, the wastewater can be released from the many industries. Our septic systems are responsible for treating larger quantities of the waste, and these systems do not always operate properly or remove enough nitrogen and phosphorus before discharging them into our main water reservoirs. Fossil fuel is another source of the nutrient pollution that can be produced from the electric power generation, industry, transportation, and agriculture have increased the amount of the nitrogen in the air through the burning of fossil fuel. The last source of the nutrient pollution is in and around our homes. Mainly the fertilizers and the pet waste and certain soaps and the detergents. They contain nitrogen and phosphorus compound that can contribute to the nutrient pollution if they are not properly used or disposed. So the amount of the hard surfaces and the type of landscaping can also increase the run of these two important nitrogen in nutrients like nitrogen and phosphorus during the wet weather seasons. So here are a few pictures showing the nutrient pollution in the marine ecosystem. These are specifically showing the process of eutrophication in terms of these large algal blooms that cover whole surface of the pond. And there is another picture showing the algal blooms over the surface of water, indicating the process of eutrophication that represent the excessive amount of nutrients in the form of phosphorus and nitrogen. So the major effects of this nutrient pollution are divided into the three classes: human health effects, environmental effects, and economic effects. The first category is called human health effects. So human health effects: excess nutrients and the harmful algal blooms create toxins and the compounds in the water that pose danger for the human health. So there are several ways that the people and the pets can be exposed to these compounds. Direct exposure to the toxic algae, drinking, accidentally swallowing, or the swimming in the water which is affected by the harmful algal bloom can cause serious health problems, including skin rashes, stomach or liver illness, respiratory problems, along with many neurological effects. Nitrates in the drinking water. Nitrate is a compound which is present as a fertilizer It can enter the drinking water in the agriculture area. According to a report in 2010 on the nutrients in the ground and the surface water by the US Geological Survey found that the nitrates were too high in 64% of shallow monitoring wells that are present in the agriculture and in the urban areas. So infants are more susceptible to the health effects posed by these nitrate nutrients, which can be serious and sometimes fatal. Byproduct of water treatment is another effect that is due to the human beings. Stormwater runoff can carry nutrients directly into the river, lakes, and reservoirs, which serve as sources of drinking water for many people. When disinfectants used to treat this drinking water, they react with this toxic algae and many harmful chemicals called dioxins. They can be treated in this way. And these byproducts of the water treatment have been linked to serious health problems, including many developmental as well as reproductive health risks are also associated within these. Second class of the major effect may be contributing to our environment, that is direct exposure to the algae. Harmful algal blooms sometimes create toxins that are detrimental to the fish and many other animals. After being consumed by the small fish and the shellfish, these toxins move up the food chain and they can impact the larger animals like sea lions, turtles, dolphins, birds, and many other creatures. Even if the algal blooms are not considered to be toxic, they can negatively impact the aquatic life by blocking out the sunlight and clogging the fish gills. Here you can see the algal bloom can reduce the ability of the fish and many other aquatic life to find the food, and they can cause entire population to leave an area or even die. In another picture, harmful algal blooms cause thick green musk that impact the clean water, recreation, business, and the property values. Dead zones and hypoxia, a condition of hypoxia. So the nutrient pollution can create the dead zones, that is, areas in water with little or no oxygen are called the dead zones, and if there is no oxygen present, this condition is called as hypoxia, where aquatic life cannot survive. They are also known as hypoxia. As discussed earlier, these areas are caused by the algal blooms consuming oxygen as they die and decompose. Aquatic animals, particularly young fish and the sea floor dwellers like the crabs and the clams, they must leave the affected area to survive. Over 166 dead zones have been documented nationwide that are largely affecting the Bay and Gulf area of the Mexico, according to one survey that was conducted in 2013. Acid rain is another effect which is caused by the nutrient pollution in terms of the environment. Acid rain caused by the nutrient pollution in the air damages the lakes, streams, estuaries, forests, and many other grasslands across the country. Air pollution. Airborne nitrogenous compounds like nitrogen oxides contribute to the formation of other air pollutants such as ground level ozone, a component of smog which can restrict visibility. So the wind and the weather can carry this ozone many miles from the urban to the rural areas. Ozone pollution can also damage the trees and harm many vegetation and beautiful scenic areas. So what is the effect of this nutrient pollution in economy? It largely affects our drinking water cost, that the nitrate and algal blooms in the drinking water sources can drastically increase the treatment cost. For example, nitrate removal system in Minnesota simply cost to rise from 5 to 10% per 1,000 gallons to over $4 per 1,000 gallons, according to one estimate. So it can also cost billions of dollars to clean up that polluted water body. Every dollar spent on protecting the sources of drinking water saves in water treatment cost. Tourism losses. The tourism industry losses close to about $1 billion each year, mostly through the losses in the fishing and boating activities as a result of water bodies that have been affected by the nutrient pollution and many other harmful algal blooms. So as a result of which airborne nutrient pollution can also affect visibility at the popular outdoor destinations like many national parks, and this kind of pollution can also damage the buildings and many other structures, especially those made up of marble and the limestones. Commercial fishing and the shellfish losses. Fishing and the shellfish industries are hurt by harmful algal blooms that kill the fish and contaminate the shellfish. Annual losses to these industries from the nutrient pollution are estimated to be in the tens of millions of dollars. So you can check how much losses by these nutrient pollution is faced by many other countries, including the Pakistan. Real estate losses. Along with all other losses, the real estate, that is the clean water, can raise the value of a nearby home up to 25%. Waterfront property values can decline because of the unpleasant sight and odor of these toxic algal blooms. So next one is type of the water pollution is called as the surface water pollution. That is the pollution of the aquatic system that are above the ground, such as streams, lakes, and the rivers. These water become polluted when rainwater runoff carries pollutants into the water. Then this leads to less oxygen production, which causes harm to the oxygen breathing organism in the water, particularly fish. So the surface water contamination is a significant problem for the municipal authorities. It can also lead to the pollution on a large scale and be a cause of the major illness in the humans. For example, as it is a pollution of the surface water into the natural water bodies, including the rivers, lakes, lagoons, oceans, and many other hazardous substances that are coming into contact with these water bodies may result in their dissolving and mixing physically within the water is called as surface water pollution. So the fertilizers, they can leak into the rivers and flooding as a result of the agriculture applications that lead to the pollution of surface water as the volume spreads across the areas that are normally not exposed to the water. And these toxic contaminants are why water must be treated before being used for the human consumption. So here you can see a few pictures of the surface water pollution, which is created by many other factors, including human beings. This is another picture of surface water pollution. So the major sources of the surface water pollution are human waste. So one of the most common sources of the surface water is the human waste, especially in case of the developing countries. In addition to the human waste, there are also many other tissues with a fertilizer seepage from farmland into the agriculture. The industrial plants are also known to contaminate the surface water with byproducts leaking into the river and into the drainage system. Then the poor municipal surface water treatment systems and adverse weather conditions such as flooding are also major sources of the surface water pollution. For a municipal authority, knowing the risk in the area and what to do about it is considered to be as critical. So there are some pathogens which are present into the surface water pollution, and one of the biggest risks to the human from the surface water pollution are these pathogens that can cause type of various waterborne diseases. These come from the human waste as well as from the industrial operations, which include organic chemicals and the many toxic heavy metals. So they can be accidental, such as rarely an oil spill incident happen in case of ocean, and like many industries eliminating their waste into the rivers or the sea. So they also produce their toxic products remaining in the fish because of exposure of these pathogens. Another type of water pollution is called as oxygen depleting. That is a phenomenon that occurs in aquatic environments as dissolved oxygen. Capital D, capital O is a symbol to represent this dissolved oxygen in the water. It becomes reduced in a concentration to a point where it becomes detrimental to many aquatic organisms living in that ecosystem. So water bodies have a large variety of the microbes that include both aerobic as well as anaerobic organisms. When they are present too much biodegradable matter is the things that can easily decay and they are end up in the water. They encourage the growth of more microbes that use up more oxygen in the water. But in the absence of such oxygen, all the aerobic organisms, they may become ultimately died, whereas anaerobic organisms, they grow more to produce many harmful toxins such as ammonia and sulfides. Here you can see the picture of conditions in water pollution representing the deprivation of oxygen or the absence of oxygen in terms we call scientifically as the oxygen depletion. This is another picture of dying fish due to oxygen depletion condition in the water pollution. And this is the most closer view of the fish, showing the toxic effects. Groundwater pollution is another type of water pollution. It is also called as groundwater contamination that occurs when the pollutants are released to the ground and make their way down into the groundwater. The pollutants often creates a contaminant plume with an aquifer. Movement of water and dispersion within the aquifers spread the pollutants over a wider area. This can also be explained with the help of a small video.
South Australia has a proud manufacturing history, but we now know that historic use of chemicals has led to contamination in soil and groundwater. This contamination can spread beneath the surface and needs addressing for current and future generations. Many of the chemicals used by industry in the past leaked or were poured onto the ground to evaporate. Fortunately, practices have changed. We now have laws that prevent these practices occurring. Soil and groundwater contamination can affect human health, but only if there is a source, such as a chemical in groundwater, a pathway, such as extracting bore water with a pump, and a receptor, a person coming into contact with that contaminated water. Groundwater close to the surface is more likely to be contaminated than deeper aquifers. That's why it is important to be informed about groundwater use from residential bores. In some areas of Adelaide, EPA advises residents not to use bore water for any purpose. If you're not sure whether there is any advice for your area, contact us or visit our website.
So next is the groundwater pollution, when the humans apply pesticides or many other chemicals to the soils. They are washed up deep into the ground by the rainwater, and they will become part of our groundwater channel by creating the pollution underground. So the natural sources, there are many sources of groundwater pollution, and unfortunately humans are to blame for many of them. Poor management of waste, the rapid growth of industry, and the irresponsible use of chemicals all endanger the groundwater people need to survive. As a natural sources, while the human cause a lot of groundwater pollution, some contamination is due to the natural processes of the earth. The substances like iron, fluoride, sulfates found in the rocks often end up in the groundwater, and when they collect in excess quantities, they can harm the quality of that water. So the groundwater like this needs to be treated before it can be used by human beings. Septic tank. In United States of America, around a quarter of the homes are linked to the septic system for the waste disposal. Individual system releases only a marginal amount of chemical or the biological waste, but when combined with other nearby systems, it can become toxic. Often containing viruses, bacteria, septic systems need to be adequately maintained to keep the groundwater safe. Then chemicals. EPA, that is the Environmental Protection Agency of they reports that there are close enough to about 16,000 chemical spills each year. Posed with difficult cleanup procedures, oftentimes these chemicals end up being washed into the soil and find their way directly into our valuable groundwater resources. Next source of the groundwater pollution is called in terms of waste. Many average consumers do not realize that the way they dispose of waste can impact the quality of the groundwater that they rely on. Lawn waste, paint, various cleaners, and the oils, all of these end up in groundwater wells every day. So pouring the wrong chemicals down the drain or neglecting to dispose of medications properly can end up harming our local resources of the groundwater. So the landfill, Waste also greatly contributes to our groundwater pollution. Contaminants often leach out of the landfill and into the groundwater aquifers or the wells. Landfill location is also essential to maintaining the safe for drinking water. So this was all about today's topic. The next topic is related to the effect of the groundwater pollution, which will be discussed later on.